Happy just the tip Tuesday, except it's Monday, so maybe it's a mindfulness Monday moment. Hey, just singing to you. We are going to do a little Chaturanga Dandasana masterclass, cuties, because that is our pose of the week. I hope you feel so blessed by this choice. You can thank Jenna if you're pissed, but actually this pose is rad. It is often done pretty poorly by most practitioners simply because of the way that a vinyasa class evolved from Ashtanga vinyasa. I think the idea of flow classes, vinyasa flow classes, is to get in a state of flow. And so to interrupt a class and be like, hada, 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 we're going to do Chaturanga Dandasana breakdown. One, is exhausting, and two, kind of defeats the purpose of the class. So you either have to go to a workshop, or your teacher has to be super in tune with your practice and all that to help you evolve that. So if you've ever done our workshop series called Yogi University, we break this down quite a bit. And if you haven't, this will be super useful to look at. Also, if you're a yoga teacher and you're looking at new ways to teach this pose, hopefully there will be some pieces here. But my main goal is to teach, to the best of my ability, the safety of this posture and how to do it effectively. One of the most, I have a fear, side note, I have a fear that people think I have like a drug problem because I itch my nose a lot, and I'm just like, need to go on the record and let you know that I have just like really bad allergies. So here we are. So anyway, that's why I'm like, not you, blicking bugs. Okay, so we're back. My goal today is to teach this as safely as possible, and one of the #1 injuries that gets sustained from yoga are shoulder labrum tears, and that's just from like a deep anterior rotation and loading of the joint that is we're either not prepared for or not really natural to our movement pattern. So I'm going to go from the bottom up, actually the top down. So we'll have a piece for each little segment of the body. So if you're working on Chaturanga Dandasana, you're having pain, you're a teacher and you want to expand on this, here are some considerations for the pose. So we're going to do it. So you will need a bolster and 2 blocks. I'm going to move my swivel chair. And let's talk about the key points of the pose. So the Chaturanga Dandasana, 4-limb staff pose, is looking for a neutral spine. It's looking for a 90-degree angle in our elbow complex, and it's looking for a whole body experience. So this tends to look very arm isolated, and it's really a full body movement. So let's start with the head. Your head is relatively 8 pounds. And this is probably the second most common foible I see with Chaturanga, which is people let their head drop at a neutral spine. So let's first reconvene on what neutral spine is. Neutral spine is approximately ear over shoulder, shoulder over elbow, elbow over hip, hip over knee, knee over ankle. You can see that because I am slightly hyperextended, that knee over ankle thing doesn't quite happen. Boop, there I'm about there. Then my head is always having drama. But ideally it's that shoulder, hip, knee, ankle, ear alignment. So we want to maintain that in Chaturanga. And the head is the first thing that's going to throw that off because it's 8 pounds. So when you set up, prepare for Chaturanga, in your plank, you already want to make sure that you're not doing yourself an injustice by letting the head drop. So keeping the head in neutral as we move through Chaturanga will provide for more of that true neutral spine shape that we're working on. So that's the first thing you can think about. You might even, in your Tadasana, you bring your hands behind your head and just gently pull your head back into your hands. A lot of us have more of a forward presenting head position because of texting and technology. So, hey, Hey, Matt Eber. So that's the first thing, is thinking about where your head is in alignment as you're taking the chaturanga. The next thing, moving our way down, are our shoulders. And one of two things tends to be out of alignment, and that's either we let the shoulders come too far forward, like an anterior rotation or hyper protraction, or the reverse. We have an aggressive retraction of the shoulder blades. So again, we're looking for neutral spine, and your shoulder blades are going to be part of this because we are using the shoulder girdle to lower ourselves halfway down. But we want to find that neutral spine. So this is something we can practice within tabletop and doing little scap push-ups until we find that middle space. So as I come to my tabletop, working retraction, so dropping the heart towards the floor, and then protraction as I push the heart away from the floor. So you can do a couple of those just to start to isolate the scapula. You'll notice that my elbows are not bending. So it's not this, it's isolating those muscles around our scapula, our sits muscles. So then we can start to add rotation. So dropping the heart down and retracting the scapula, then pulling the shoulder blades down the back and starting to move the chest forward, then retracting and moving the chest away. So drawing these little circles, again, elbows stay straight or extended, head as best as you can, stays in neutral spine, and then reversing that. So these are things you can do to just stabilize and work scapular stability to prepare for chaturanga. So when we move towards chaturanga, we want to keep those scapula as neutral as possible. So not retracting, not protracting, stable. Another thing that I think about when I'm doing chaturanga is drawing the armpit down towards the hip point to engage some of the side musculature there, which will help support the strength of the pose. So once you've been able to isolate the scapula and find neutral, then it's trying that, keeping the head in neutral, and seeing if I can maintain neutral scapula as I move through. Oh, that felt good. Chaturanga, and maybe up dog, maybe not. Okay, so head, keep it in neutral. Scapula, keep them in neutral. Those are some great things to practice creating that stability. The next thing is your rib cage and your thoracic spine. So if your belly starts to drop, so instantly if the floor were here and my ribs and belly are moving this way, you can see my shoulders naturally, because that's how they sit on my back, move the opposite. So if they didn't, I guess I could do that, but most naturally you're going to counter that force, which is going to create further retraction. So we want to keep a stable, neutral thoracic and lumbar spine. So a lot of times we'll see either hyperkyphosis or lordosis because this midline stability is lacking. So one thing you can do in Tadasana, Sukhasana, plank pose is bringing your thumb to both your sternum and your pelvis, finding neutral spine, which can also be found by bringing your hands to your pelvis, looking down. You should be able to see your thumbs and your pointer fingers and not any of the other fingers. Once you've found that, trying to maintain that as you do things. So as I come up into Tadasana, I want to maintain that, not opening or closing that space. As I come down into tabletop, I want to maintain that and not expand or contract that space. So protraction and retraction, or cat-cow, or whatever terms you want to use, are super useful for tons of things. So for chaturanga, we want to maintain neutral spine. So we're pulling the front ribs in, we're maintaining that equidistance between sternum and pubic bone that we found in neutral spine, and we want to maintain that through our chaturanga, not letting our belly drop, or this is one that I see all the time, keeping the hips high because we're tucking the tail, we're squeezing those abdominal muscles so tight. So it's less of our outer abdominal muscles and more of our inner sheath, our transverse that are creating that stability. So one simple way you can find those muscles, try not to do this in, like a very public space, is to cough and have your hands on your belly as you do that, and you'll feel the muscles that need to recruit to stabilize and keep that space solid. So it's not a big sit up, it's just a drawstring effect. If you get a drawstring bag, you're trying to drawstring your waist in, but not so much that you come more into like cow pose, cat pose. Okay, so that's thoracic spine, torso. Also the lumbar, which I just hit on a little bit, but definitely something to consider is your lumbar spine. So I will see, let's imagine that I'm in tabletop or plank for a second. I will see people be more in this shape. So this is your rectus abdominis, the first layer of your core muscles. Their job is to help you sit up, flex the spine. That's what they're mainly there to do. So a lot of times people will be so contracted here that they start to drop the tail under or curl the tail, creating a lumbar curve. And that actually is going to limit your ability to do the pose correctly. But it's also continually shortening those muscles, which over time will create instability. So neutral spine is where we want to go. So when you come to your tabletop, preparing for your class, and you go through cat-cow, bringing more awareness now to the lumbar spine, see if you can find that natural neutral curve. Again, Chaturanga is a neutral spine in your spine. And then as you go through Chaturanga, can you maintain that, not swinging the hips or tucking the tail, which requires a lot of deep core. Okay, so looking for that stable pelvis, neutral spine, and again, back to the thoracic spine, stable transverse abdominis. So head, shoulders, knees and toes, just kidding. Head, shoulder position, thoracic spine, lumbar spine. The next thing are our quads. So most people who are getting that tuck, what they're trying to do is create firmness or toneness to keep or hold the shape for Chaturanga, which I love that. I'm here for that. I love that choice. But a more effective way to do that without messing with neutral spine is to engage your quads. So engaging your quads will help tone some of those deep core muscles, but not necessarily affect as deeply the tilt of your pelvis. So when you're going through Chaturanga, actually I'll do the standing first, think about, same as Tadasana, it all goes back to Tadasana, is toning your quads. You can do this by standing up and just squeezing the fronts of your legs to feel those muscles of your quadriceps tone. All right, so then translating that to your Chaturanga, instead of forgetting or neglecting the legs, I want to turn on the quads, not tendon, tendon, not tendon, tendon. Keep them turned on, keep that neutral spine, and see if that helps me maintain that stability I'm seeking in Chaturanga. For the final thing that I'm going to go back and talk about props you can use and ways you can build this if the preliminary strength is not there, so don't freak out and be like, God, I hate this pose, are your feet. So Chaturanga is rarely done just as Chaturanga. And with our interest, combined with CrossFit, I think it is not super effective as a movement on its own, because ideally we're going for full joint capacity or full range of motion for that joint. And that depends on everybody. Everybody is different, everybody's joints are different, but in general, full range of motion is healthier for a joint than kind of stopping and starting. So Chaturanga in isolation, I wouldn't just throw in there, but Chaturanga often moves into upward facing dog or Bhujangāsana, but more so upward facing dog. So if you want to make that transition, I tend to see a lot of misalignment with just generally how we're using the feet to move us from Chaturanga to upward facing dog. Okay, so when you're moving from Chaturanga to upward facing dog, there's a forward movement. I will sometimes see this which is, I think, attempting to do what I'm about to talk about. But instead, we want to create more stability and structure around that instead of just swooping through. Although it does feel really cool, and you can like toss your hair, and I get it. But we want to be safe on our shoulder joint. So when you set up for Chaturanga, wrists should be underneath the shoulders. And as we move to Chaturanga, it's not straight down. So check it out. When I come straight down, if I were to come to upward facing dog from here, there is a significant amount of space between my wrist and my navel, which if we think about a bridge, if I were to keep moving the supports away from a bridge, that bridge is going to collapse. So I'm going to move the supports closer in to support, I guess would be the apex of the bridge. I don't know, I have a dance degree. So we want to keep the support close to the load. So in order to do that, we need to transition as we do Chaturanga from our shoulder right over our wrist to in front of our wrist to both create a 90-degree angle and also to prepare our thumbs to be closer in proximity to the load of upward facing dog, which is our hips and our navel. So it looks like this. I come to plank pose. I shift my weight as far forward as I can. For me, that's pretty far because I've got hypermobile wrists. I bend my elbows. Now I'm in a 90-degree angle. And then look at that. When I press up to up dog, my belly button is right in between or very close to my thumbs. So that's something to consider from the feet. I'm going to do it one more time, and I want you to watch my feet now because that's really what has to make that shift for you. So plank pose, my head's in neutral, my scapula are in neutral, my core muscles are turned on, but not so much that I lose my lumbar spine, my quads are engaged. As I inhale, I shift my weight forward, look at my toes, look at my toes, look at my toes. I'm barely on my feet to move to upward facing dog. Okay, so that's head, shoulders, torso, lumbar, legs, feet. Last thing to consider before we go to props are your hands and your wrists. I will often see people too narrow, fingers too narrow, or I guess like internal rotation or kind of hands too narrow. So in general, we're looking for middle finger to line up to the middle of the shoulder. If you have sensitive wrists or maybe you have limited mobility, some hacks are to slightly externally rotate, which is going to turn on a different set of muscles in the shoulders, but that's okay. We're not looking for like a seal push-up, but just middle finger maybe on a diagonal. And the other thing you can do is slightly widen your hands. What that will create is a bit more instability, like you're not having bone-on-bone stacking, so you're going to have to use more musculature. But if you have immobility, it can give you some more space for mobility where you are limited. So that's one thing. I mentioned the fingers being narrow. This is a Derek Cookism that I love. We want spread fingers, but not this pinky so far out that it's beyond the line of the hand. That can cause some major issues later on too. So instead of this, it's a little softer. It's more like that. So we're trying not to have like robot hands. Although I look really cool right now, so I'm just gonna keep doing this with my hands while I talk to you. What we don't want are, oh my God, I'm such a good dancer. Okay, sorry, commercial break, I'm back. So what we don't want are our hands like this. If you think about your hands as your feet, anytime you do an arm balance or something, weight bearing, my foot has a lot more surface area than my hand. So I want to create as much surface area as I can. I also want to be able to engage the full spectrum of my forearm muscles. But I don't want to go so far that this pinky, which really isn't meant to be a load-bearing structure, is taking a ton of weight. So I want to make sure that my fingers are spread, but they're not so spread that I'm putting stress on this pinky. It's like on your just like precious baby pinky finger. Like, how dare you? Oh. So Derek Cook taught me that. I absolutely love that tip, and it has changed my wrist stability, safety, comfort. Okay, synonyms over. So some props. So Chaturanga requires upper body strength. It requires core strength. And if those are things that you are working on, great. So are most of us, all of us, you know, probably 10% of the world aren't working on those things. Meaning they already have it. You know what I mean? Like not everybody gives a shit. So not everybody's working on it, but most of us have opportunity in that area. Does this make sense? No, I'm just yammering. So back to our props. First thing I would encourage is actually not using props and building the full body strength it requires to lower yourself down in one piece. So you don't need any props for that. The way to work that is either from plank, or if that's even not where we're at quite yet, from our plank on our knees, being sure that plank on our knees doesn't turn into tabletop, because then as you go straight down, you've got a problem. So making sure that we either set that up by tucking one toe, dropping the knee where that is, tucking the other, dropping the knee, so now I'm able to hold plank. And then I'm working to get my chest all the way down in one piece, and even working that back up. And you know what this is called in everybody else's world is just a push-up. Now the difference is the elbows are not going wide, the hands are not wider than the shoulders, so we're tracking those elbows by the waist. They're also not coming in. So I'll do this one facing you. This is another thing that I'll see often, which is people will pull their elbows into themselves, and that creates a whole mess of stuff in your shoulder. So we're looking for elbows coming by the sides, not into the sides, and not hanging out here, just by the sides. First option to build that strength is working full lower down, going through cobra, and then downward facing dog. Next one, if you really are dedicated to this 90-degree angle of your elbows, is grabbing a bolster and or a couch cushion or whatever is about, I don't know, 6 inches off the floor. So I'm going to come into my plank variation from my knees or my toes with my hands flanking the bolster. I'm going to do the same action that we talked about earlier with the feet, so shifting my weight forward. And then as controlled in one piece, lowering myself down into that chaturanga shape. Now I have support. I can look back with my arms at 90, maybe not quite. And then from here, either using it to take upward facing dog, or if you're really looking to build the strength, trying to slowly move yourself back up to plank from our bolster position. Last option, less supported, are blocks, and this will depend on your humeral length, so how long that this bone of your arm is and in relationship to your forearm. So for me, it's about second highest height. Some people it might be, highest height. Some people it might be second highest height. It just depends. It might not be perfect. You may need to use a blanket, blah, 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 blah. So wherever you are, playing around with your hands going behind the blocks. So this gives you two things. One, something to shift forward to, and two, a target. But then I'm having to do the deep work of keeping my core, and I'm even kind of tucking my tail. So using those to give you a little bit of support, but not so much that you can't do the work with your core. That's what I got. You know, I'm gonna sit here for a moment, check my IG feed, make sure no one else asked a question. Chaturanga really is a wonderful pose to build strength. What do you do if you get fatigued when having to perform multiple chaturangas in class? Ooh, that's such a good question. So I'm gonna riff off that. So chaturanga is a wonderful pose to build strength, and if you, first of all, I have an opinion for yoga teachers, and that is there's really no reason to have a billion chaturangas in one class. it's only functional to a point. So first thing I would say is, like, to the yoga teachers out there, really analyze, why am I using Chaturanga? I've definitely been to classes where there are just a billion. If you're trying to, you know, elevate heart rate or, you know, fatigue the upper body, certainly, and core, certainly there's some function to that, but there are also a lot of other ways to do that. And over and over and over again, Chaturangas are just abusive to the wrist, to the shoulder. Even if you're someone who does a lot of push-ups, because it's not full range of motion, I just don't think it's that functional. So yoga teachers, I would look at, if you have more than 10 in a class, like, really have a good why for that. To answer Lauren's question, what do you do when you're tired? Skip them. Like, don't do them. And, you know, what tends to follow Chaturanga up dog is then down dog. You can do down dog with your hands on the blocks to give your wrists a little bit of space. So that's one thing. So given my wrist joint, it's not as harsh of an angle if I've got my hands flat on the ground. The other option is just take out down dog altogether, take child's pose. But I would advocate for yourself, and teachers give people the option to, you know, not do all of them, especially if you're coming to class here this week and you're doing a ton of them. Be selective about, you know, do I feel strong enough to do this to the fullest ability, or am I worn out? So yeah, I would say, like, only do them when they're functional to do them, not because you are using it as a form of abuse, of like, you need to lose calories, you need to tone up, sis, like, whatever thing in your mind has made you think you have to do these, I would look at that. And teachers, I would look at your why behind offering so many, because there are certainly other ways to get to the goals of Chaturanga without doing a million Chaturangas. Also, if you're so tired and you can't do them, they're no longer impactful and perhaps injurious. So that was one of my questions. Mary Margaret asked about props, which hopefully, excuse me, I shared a little bit about that. Always use props that you need. I have seen called the Chaturanga bra, where you have like a structure of the strap where it helps you create retraction. I like that to give you the feedback to teach your muscles what they need to do. Ultimately, it's not super realistic for a flow-based class, maybe more of an alignment style, a Iyengar style class that might be more appropriate, but it would be a lot to simulate in a regular class. Another one that I used to teach with that I don't anymore is the strap around the forearms, and then as you lower it, kind of catches your abdomen. What I don't love about that is because people are abducting or pushing their elbows out, people tend to then drop the shoulders forward, which puts a lot of weight on the shoulder joint. It's not super great. So I used to teach that, and I don't teach that anymore, but it's definitely can be effective if you have a particular way to teach it. So so there's that. I'm gonna check one more time because I'm real bad at the Instagram sometimes. I think that was my only other question. Yeah, there are studies about the tear, the labrum tear, and it coming from Chaturangas. So I would just be very conscious of your body, and the asana practice is not here to be a form of abuse. It's here to be a form of self-inquiry and discipline, but discipline doesn't have to look like abuse. And those things tend to get mixed up, and discipline, you'll probably hear it often, might look like taking child's pose, but discipline also might look like holding plank and finding neutral spine instead of taking Chaturanga. And that might be even less fun, because Chaturanga can be a reprieve from plank, but maybe what you need is to learn how to create stability in your pelvis and in your mid-core. It might be holding Tadasana and really getting curious about your stance there. But if anything, reinforce neutral spine. Maybe you just do that in tabletop. Give your wrists breaks. Teachers, if you're teaching this week or in general, you like to teach a lot of Chaturangas, consider how you're giving your students breaks. What's the opposite of extending the wrist is flexing the wrist, so maybe Padahastasana, where you stand and put your hands under your feet, you know, a gentle wrist stretch. Well, this is really gentle, this sucks. Bringing your fists together and trying to straighten your elbows. I learned that from Spencer Hooks. Ew. So yeah, there are tons of ways you can neutralize the wrist, but being cognizant that most of us sit, you know, flexed and flittering. So this can be an extreme if we're on our wrists over and over and over again. I hope this was helpful. Please comment or message with anything that we can keep sharing information on. If you come to class this week, please sprinkle in yin, restorative, other alternatives. We're doing the chest opener, chest stretch to offer, you know, a counter to Chaturanga this week. But above all, just listen to your body. Again, this can be a super effective and useful pose, and it can be injurious and detrimental if you overdo it or you aren't paying attention to how you're doing it. So rather than just zipping through Chaturanga Dandasana, maybe you take this week to make them the most conscious, maybe just 4 Chaturangas of your life and the rest you skip. Yeah, so I hope this was helpful. Again, message with any questions, and we'll have a shortened, abbreviated version up tomorrow on our Instagram, IGTV, so check that out. And thank you so much for listening. Happy practicing, and namaste.